In this exercise, we'll be using some advanced platform character movement, and we'll be featuring the double jumping. Let me just hit the preview and show you what I mean here. We've got some gravity, and of course I've got left and right with my arrow keys, and I've put a double jump feature into the spacebar, which means it can jump twice, basically take 2 leaps after it leaves the ground. And let me just demonstrate that here. Spacebar, spacebar. Now if I keep hitting, it doesn't jump any further than the 2 times until it reaches back to the ground. So jump once and back, jump once, twice, and you can see here it will only give me the double jump even though I repeatedly hit the spacebar. So I combined that feature with left and right to move up to the next platform. So let's just try to jump over here. So we'll move to the right, double jump. And because it touched the edge of that, it did give me a new lease on life and allowed me to jump again. So I can back up here and then make a run for it. 1, 2. There we go. And back up here and take a run for it. 1, 2. There we are. Of course I can jump again from any point once I'm on one of these designated ground levels. So let's take a quick look and see how this is built, and then we'll start a new one. Okay, so at its core I've got 3 actors, one called floor, one called wall, and one called hero. So of course all of these horizontal bars are the floors, and the vertical ones are derived from the wall actors. If I go into one of these, let's go into all of them actually, and I'll show you what the settings are. We'll start with hero. We'll double click it. We've got a size of 50 by 75 high. So 50 pixels by 75 pixels. And if we go into our physics, we've got a bounciness of 0.05, so just the slightest bit of bounce to it. Fixed rotation, and it is movable. And we have the density set to 100 and friction set to 3, which means there's a bit of drag if it's moving along another surface. Okay, so those are the basics. We'll get into the behaviors shortly, but the actual physical features for that. Then the physical features for the floor are 50 by 50 pixels. And the physics have been all turned off. Density, friction, and bounciness are all set to 0. Fixed rotation and movable are turned off. Since it's not movable, this doesn't really get affected, but we need to make sure that it's not movable. And it's basically the same settings for the wall. Size is also 50 by 50 pixels, and the physics have been turned off as well. 0 density, 0 friction, 0 bounciness, unchecked on movable. And those are the basics for sizes. Then of course we dragged out floor and reset these pieces, and if I double click on this, you can see that the height remains at 50, but we just manually stretched the width. And that goes the same for these other pieces. This one would have been duplicated from here, and then a last one on the floor. Now let me actually go back in and show you something that's different here inside of our attributes. If I go down here, you'll see there's tags. All of the floor elements have a tag called ground. If I go back here, it's actually in the prototype. Tags ground, but I can't edit that right there. So let me show you how we get to that. If I go back to home and over to actors, we can create tags in this column, and I simply can add one here. So I'll temporarily create one. I'll call it floor, or rather wall. And to add that tag to an actor, I go to my all actors, and I would drag the actor over top of the named tag. And then if I click on that, I can see that wall has the attribute of the tag called wall. If I don't want to have that there, I can just delete it over here. but we do have the one tag called ground, and if I click on it, you can see floor has been attributed with that tag. And we can prove it by going here and taking a look at tags. So that in effect is how you can create a tag and associate it with an actor. So at this point you might want to freeze frame the video so that you can go in and build this environment if you intend to follow along for the rest of the demo. So again, I've got a couple of walls here, 4 different sections that act as the floor, and again they have a tag called ground, and then our hero up here, which will have some gravity attributed to it. Okay, so I'm going to move over to a file that I had just previously set up with the walls, the floors, and the actor, the hero, already in place. And we'll go into the hero and we'll start to set a few things up. First we'll start with the gravity. I'm going to use an accelerate behavior for that, so we'll drag that in here. And we'll just set the direction to the down direction, which is 270 degrees. And we'll give it a pretty good speed. We'll actually set that to 800 for acceleration. And we'll just set that relative to scene. And if I preview that, it should drop pretty good. But you notice that it kept going. We want to actually have it stop when it hits the floor or the walls. So let's put in some collisions now. I'm going to create a group because I have 2 different collisions, one for the walls and one for the floors. So I'll just create a group and I'll just call it collide or collisions. Okay, and then I'll go in here and I'll grab a collide behavior and I'll say bounce when colliding with actor floor, and that's fine, and I'll duplicate that, option click and drag, and I'll keep it inside of the group, and this time we'll say wall. So when it collides with the floor or the wall, it will stop. Let's just save that and preview that. There we go. We don't have any movement yet. We're going to do that next. Okay, I'm just going to name these a little more specifically. Collide with floor and collide with wall. Okay, and I can leave that for now and I'll close that. The next thing I need to work on is the left and right motion. So let me create a new rule for that to house all of that. And maybe I'll just call this regular move rules. Okay, and we'll have 2 conditions. It's a little different than the way we've done it before. It's basically going to detect if your left and right arrow keys are up, the hero will stop motion in either direction. So we're starting with a default of stopping unless other conditions are present. So let's go actor receives event, key, keyboard, right is up. And we'll create another one, very similar. Actor receives event key, keyboard left is up. And the condition will be set attribute, so change attribute. And the attribute will be the hero's position, or motion rather, linear, x is set to 0. So motion linear velocity dot x is the speed at which it travels left to right, and we're setting it to 0 if the left and right keys are up. In other words, if they're not being pressed. So all of the actual action occurs in the otherwise state. So let's create some more rules inside of here. I'll add another rule here. And we'll just name this rule walk right. And you know what, I'm going to change this one's name to stop me. Just makes things very self-evident when you're looking at it, when you have a whole lot of behaviors applied. Good time to save as well. Okay, back to the walk right. Again, we're going to have 2 conditions here. One will be whether the right key is pressed down, and the other is to check whether the actor called hero is sitting on the ground. If it's not on the ground, we don't want to be able to move it left or right. So let's start with the key. Keyboard right is down this time. And we'll add one more condition here. When actor receives event, overlaps or collides with floor. So it has to be on the floor, and the right arrow key needs to be pressed down. We'll add a change attribute here. And again, we'll go with our velocity. Hero, motion, linear. And we'll just set that to, let's say, 200. And I'll save that. So I should be able to move to the right now. Let's just preview this. Okay, it's hit the ground. I can move right. I can't move left yet, but I will once I plug that in. So let's go back. And since it's very similar to the walk right, option key down, I'm going to duplicate this inside of this rule. Try that again. And we'll rename this walk left. Of course, I'll change the keyboard to the left arrow. And when we're moving to the left, we use a negative number, so minus 200. And hit my tab key, save that, and test it. So left and right. So we're good to go. The next step will be to work on the jump feature. And let me just collapse some of these. And the next will be the jump. Now for this feature, we're going to need to create a couple of actor level attributes. So while I'm still inside of the hero, let's just go and add two attributes. The first one will be Boolean, true or false. And we'll name that jumping. So it's to detect or flag whether our actor is jumping or not. And we'll leave that default to false unchecked. And we'll create a second one here. This one will be an integer. And this one will be to establish the number of jumps one can make using double jumping. In this case, it'll be 2. So let's just call it jump count. And we'll just leave that at 0 for now. We'll come back to it a little later. So to get started with the jump feature, let's go back into our regular moves rule. And we need to add a condition because we're going to be pressing the space bar to jump up. So let me add a new condition here. Actor receives event key spacebar is up. And I guess I can just copy one of these. So let's just copy here, click and drag with the option key down. And we'll call this one jumping. Okay, so we need to change the keyboard to the space bar. And the attribute needs to be changed to the y-axis, up and down. So hero, motion, linear, y. And we'll just set that to 200. And I'll save that and we'll give that a try. Okay, so left and right and spacebar. Okay, it's working, but I'm going to change my jump. Okay, so let's just go back here and we'll just increase the height. And I'll change that from 200 to 500 under the jumping. And we'll just quickly preview that. Hit my spacebar and that's better. So right now it just jumps up. I don't get any double jump. It will only jump after it's touched the ground. And I only get one try each time. Left and right. And I can combine left, jump, of course, and I get that nice arc. But it's not high enough to get me up to the next levels yet. So we'll go to the next step and we'll create some conditions which will allow double jump occurring after we've touched the floor. And let's just go back here. Okay, so to start the process to allow for my double jump, I'm just going to make some room here and go into my collisions group and add another collision detect for the ground here. So I can actually just go in here and go rule and drag that in there. And this one's going to be based on whether the actor touches the ground. So we'll just say overlaps or collides with actor type floor. And we'll just change the attribute. And we'll drag that in there. And what I want to do is I want to change the jump count to 2. So as soon as I touch the floor, I'm going to set jump count to 2, which ultimately will allow for 2 jumps to occur after leaving the floor. So let's just go under change attribute, hero, jump count, and we'll set that to 2. If I wanted to make it a triple jump, I'd make that a 3. So once we hit the floor again, jump count changes to 2. Let me just give this a better name than rule. Flag that I've touched the ground. Okay, so that's very descriptive. And again, once I hit the ground, I raise my jump count up to 2. So the next step is to actually go into our moves. So let's collapse our collisions here. And we'll add the feature, or actually we'll change the feature under jumping. Right now, if it hits the floor and the space bar is down, it jumps. But if we left it like this, it would only be able to jump the one time, because once it leaves the floor, it's not going to respond anymore with this current condition. So let's modify that. And we'll go in over here. And we'll go to the attribute. And we'll look for the attribute, hero, jump count. And we'll say if jump count is greater or equal, rather just greater than 0, not equal. If it's greater than 0, allow to jump. Now if we left it like that, it would just jump up and up and up forever. So let's go in here and make a modification with a change attribute. We're going to decrease it by 1 every time we do hit the space bar. So let's just go change attribute, and we'll change the attribute hero jump count to hero jump count -1. So basically, if you do the math, you get 2 turns at it until you hit the ground again, and then it resets it to the 2, and you get 2 jumps. Remember, every time you hit the jump, if you're in the air, it subtracts 1 from the count. And the condition is that it needs to be greater than 0 to be able to jump. So let's just save this and give this a try. Preview. I'll let it hit the ground. So I'll just hit my spacebar twice. And it did work. You can hear that I'm hitting it repeatedly, but it only responds to the 2 first hits once it's left the ground. 1, 2, and that's it. So now I should be able to back up and take a run for it. There we go. And I'll just take a run for it in this direction. Double jump. And I'm on my way to the top of the ladder. And there you have it. That's your double jump. Now if we wanted to change the number of jumps, we just go back here into our hero and open up collisions, and we just change the change attribute jump count to a different number. So I could change that to a 3 and preview that, and 1, 2, 3, and I get the 3 jumps. Every time I've hit the ground, I get 3 more jumps. So of course I can combine left and right and jump. I will set that back to 2. And another possibility with that is that I could create yet another attribute, potentially called power up, if you will. And let's say I had coins sitting around the screen. Every time I collected a coin, I could power up, and I could add 1 to that number inside of the attribute. And instead of putting a hard number in here, I would just set it, of course, to the attribute associated with the power up, if it was to exist here. And whatever that value is, it would get adopted by the jump count, and that would be, controlled by yet another attribute. And speaking of attributes, I decided I actually don't need this status attribute of jumping. So I'm just going to go over and delete it. And we're just going to use jump count for today's exercise. So again, I'll just hit preview. We do have some pretty solid gravity there. Left and right. And spacebar double jumps. And you can see I only get 2 per launch. And it does allow me to move up to the next platform level. And I'd like you to build one of these for me today.